Hello, everybody. Thank you for sticking around for a couple minutes there. Experiencing some technical difficulties, but you guys are no stranger to that. You are our live, wonderful live joiners and viewers and guests and audience. Thank you so much for coming back. This is the fourth and final edition of this series that we've been doing with Raj, and we're so excited for you guys to be here for this last one.
I'm pumped as well. And you would think 19 months into doing everything virtually that the internet would have figured out how to not have internet issues, but it does. And we're going to work through it anyways.
Yes, correct. So with that, we're not going to spend too much time like looking at the chat. If you guys do have specific questions, we've got people that are going to be in the chat and they're going to pipe them over to us in Zoom. So please do. Any questions that you have, pop them in that chat. And we will be as responsive as possible. We just maybe won't be as quick as we usually are on the little YouTube chat response, but please ask away.
Shall we dive in?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And again, a big shout out to everybody for joining today. Thank you for staying as we figured out those pre-live technical difficulties. I always love when there's an active chat. Because of my own internet issues, I can't access the chat during this, but afterwards, I love going back in and seeing what the comments were. So please be lively, be active. I would love to see what you're reacting to in real time. I'll be able to see it in post time. And I'd love to kind of just hear your questions along the way as well. So I'm ready to do this, and I hope you are all as well. This is part 4 of 4 of our big summer series that we've been doing over the last 4 months called Sales and Scale, the Sales and Scale Try Not to Suck summer series. And this is sales presentations that don't suck. So for those of you who are sellers who use a deck, let's talk about how you make that better. And if you don't use a deck, let's talk about why you should. And let's dive right in. Confirmation, Sarah, my screen is visible, yes? Awesome.
Correct.
Awesome. All right, great. So I want to just dive right into it. Again, sales presentations that don't suck. And I want to start by sharing with you the opportunity of a lifetime that I had several years ago. I was working at a digital product agency, and my team had won the opportunity to pitch to a major entertainment brand. Major entertainment brand. They have produced some of the most popular TV shows in America. And they wanted to add a gamified digital loyalty program to their #1 show. When I say major, trust me, you have definitely heard of this network before and this brand before, and you've definitely seen this show before. And no, just because the camera says NBC on it does not automatically mean I'm talking about NBC. Unfortunately, due to an NDA, I'm never allowed to publicly say who this company was. But if you ever meet with me privately, I can tell you what it rhymes with. And so it was a huge deal for our company. If we were going to win this, it would have been the largest deal in company history. And when I say that, what I mean is multi-year deal, $10 million plus per year. And it actually would have been such a big contract that my manager had to tell me beforehand, hey, if we win this, we'll have to talk about restructuring your compensation plan because this large of a deal was never factored in and we might go broke paying you off. And you also wouldn't have to work the rest of the year. So, it was an RFP process for those of you who are familiar, like it was bidded out. And then, you had to kind of submit like your technical specifications, and then it was narrowed down to a top 3. And we had made it into that top 3. And knowing that we had this huge meeting coming up, we spent dozens of hours coming up with the perfect strategy. And we meticulously put together our presentation. We got inputs from the different departments. We had it beautifully designed. We even had an animated explainer video that we put into it, like that was custom made just for them. And then it was pitch day. So we flew 4 people from our team out to their headquarters for a live pitch. And it was kind of a crazy situation because I found myself sitting across the table from the executive producer of literally one of the most popular TV shows of all time, and a show that I've been watching for years. And I'm sure that you have been watching for years as well. And so this was our chance to execute, right? And this was our chance to really hit it out of the park and win this massive deal. And I could feel all that hard work was about to pay off big time. So we opened up our slide deck and we began. And what do you think happened? And again, I'm not gonna be able to see the chat right now, but I do want to go back and look at it. So in the chat, let me know, what do you think happened? Was it, A, did they say, this is the best presentation I've ever seen? B, did they say, you know what, this is pretty good. Let's have a couple more meetings to talk through budget and finalize on the strategy? Or C, did they say, this is terrible? So was it A, did they say best presentation I've ever seen and hired us on the spot? B, did they say, this is pretty good, let's have a couple more meetings to fine tune things? Or C, did they say, this is terrible? Well, the correct answer is, perhaps surprising to you, the correct answer was C. It wasn't just that they said this was terrible. It was that what ended up happening was what to this day, I now look back and I call it a sales deck fatality. For those of you who remember the video game Mortal Kombat, what started off as excitement on both sides of the table turned like an hour and a half later, the executive producer was just picking us apart. It was like a lion like going after a carcass. Our presentation was bad. Our strategy was not on point. Our supporting data wasn't there. Our impact was off, right? It really felt like playing the business version of Mortal Kombat, where you could feel like your energy waiting as time passes, and they're like punching on you, and then finally this voice from the corner yells, "Finish him!" And then this executive producer is just like reaches in and pulls our heart out of our chest and leaves it beating on that conference room table, right? It felt terrible. So the meeting then ended with a less senior member on their team walking us to the door saying, we'll be in touch. And so my team left that meeting with our heads down. The cab ride back to the hotel was complete silence. My boss didn't say a single word, and I could always tell when she was really upset, like upset to the point where she was beyond words, was when she would just look at photos of her kids on her phone as like a coping mechanism. That's what she was doing. And no one was willing to say that we blew it out loud, but really we all knew internally that's what happened. So then a week later, I got an email from them saying, thanks, but no thanks. And how could this have happened though, right? Because I'm thinking about that. I'm like, you know what? At worst, we have equal technology compared to the other two finalists who we know made it into that top three. But at best, we actually have way better technology. And we had multiple examples of other companies who we had built these successful programs for. We were more experienced than anyone else in the game. And our proposed solution, we thought was pretty damn good too. And like I said, we even had a custom-made animated explainer video to drive the point home. So what happened that it went all downhill so quickly? And the answer was, it was our presentation. Because our first 4 slides looked something like this. We started with the classic NASCAR slide, where we put a bunch of our customer logos on the screen, and we bragged about how they're all a part of our client roster. We've worked with all these Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 brands, et cetera, et cetera. From there, we went to what I called the proven solution slide, where we talked about the high level overview of our solution suite. And trust me, we used all the buzzwords like holistic, data-driven, patented, customer-centric, you name it. From there, we went to the tech stack slide, where we talked about, hey, it's not just that we have this great solution suite, but it's also backed up by a 99.9% uptime with these API integrations and so forth, and these security specifications. And then we hit what I call the suits slide, where we talked about our years of experience. We lined up our executive leadership's headshots, and then we put little bios underneath them that proved that combined, we had like 250 years of experience. And then from there, we had a little bit more detail about ourselves. I believe we had a slide where we had a photo of our headquarters with bullet points of all the different satellite locations around the country and around the world. And then we then dove into our strategy that we had custom built for them. And this format was our downfall. And hearing it back, you might be like, well, duh, what are you thinking? But the reality is, it didn't work for us, And most presentations actually look like this. And that's the big problem, because that format or a variation on that format is a total snooze fest. It doesn't show the buyer that you care about them. It shows that you care about making yourself look good. And chances are it's going to look and sound exactly the same as what your competitors are doing, which means the buyer, by the time they hear you say it, they're like, oh my God, I've heard this before. Let me tuck this in the back and work on something else while they're talking. I heard someone say this once. I wish I could remember who, because I always want to give them credit, but I think it's a great statement. He said, it's funny that we build things in PowerPoint because most presentations aren't powerful and they have no point. Now, when I think back to that, it really was a terrible moment, but it set me on a journey of learning. It set me on this sort of like path of figuring out, how do you become a better storyteller? How do you create better presentations? How do you not have that kind of outcome? And that journey spanned several years. And I ended up finding the perfect format in the most unlikely of places. Because when I look back today, if I had a time machine, if I had a do-over, I would have done this. I would have modeled my entire presentation on the Hamilton musical. And my advice to you is to do the same. And I'm gonna explain this in detail as we go on today. Unfortunately, I don't have a time machine, but after that, sales deck fatality, I vowed to never let that happen again. And I'm like, I'm never going to create another presentation that sucks. And I'll tell you the reason why I even thought to look at Hamilton and why I said, okay, there's something here, is because I think it helps to understand a little bit more about who I am. For those of you who are at parts 1, 2, or 3 of this series, this next part is going to sound a little familiar. For those of you who are new and tuning in today, let me just give you a brief background on myself. My name is Rajiv Nathan, aka RajNATION. I am the founder and chief pitch artist of startup Hypeman, but I do all of this because my core belief is that everyone deserves a voice, and that spans across all of the work that I do. So to understand me is to understand that I sit here today as the founder and chief pitch artist of startup Hypeman, but I also have with me being a hip hop artist. I'm also a yoga instructor. I'm also a professional ring announcer for amateur and professional combat sports like MMA and kickboxing, etc. And so when I look at the business landscape, I use this hybrid background and I bring it to the table here because I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from the outside world, from the world of entertainment, that we should be applying more to our business environment. And so for the last 5 years, what I've been doing is bringing this hybrid background of marketing, branding, sales, and blending business with entertainment to help companies build and deliver presentations that stand out to their audience and stand apart from their competitors. And what I want to walk you through today is exactly how we do that. And as you all will recall, if you've been here before, this is part 4. This is the finale of our Try Not to Suck summer series. In June, it was the elevator pitch. In July, it was your cold email strategy. Last month was about your demo call flow and your demo call strategy. And now we're wrapping it up with sales presentations that don't suck, because if you were there last month, and if you weren't, you can look up the video. It's on YouTube. Just search predictable revenue startup Hypeman. It should show up. What I showed you in the ideal demo call framework was part of that framework before you demo your product is taking your buyer through a presentation, through a well-crafted pitch deck. So today, let's look at how we actually do that segment of it, whether it's your demo call or whether it's a custom proposal situation, whatever it might be. And so here's the flow of information for today. First, we're going to talk through why presentations and when to use one. Then we're going to talk about the mindset of think like an entertainer. Then I'm going to break down the Hamilton musical for you in a way I'm going to guess you've never thought of before, and have that lead into what we call the Hamilton presentation method, along with specific takeaways for you today. And of course, it wouldn't be a workshop without a bonus at the end. So stick around, please. I want to call out just one quick thing here as we go through today's content. I am aware of the nuance based on industry, sales process, price of product, etc. What I'm providing you here is the philosophy and the sort of advanced strategies for the majority of B2B selling environments. I'll do my best to speak to situational nuance wherever I can, but just understand that I'm likely advocating for this for you and your company and your industry, even if you're like, oh no, that wouldn't work for us because of our sales process. There's always a way to work it in. So let's kick it off then. Why a presentation? Oh, you know what? The other thing I want to mention is just I'm going to use the words presentation and deck and pitch deck and sales presentation interchangeably. I mean the same thing when I say any of those phrases. So let's kick it off with why a presentation. I think you might be asking yourself this if you're not using one right now. Maybe you're saying, why do I even need a sales presentation? Maybe you're asking it now. Maybe you've asked yourself this before, and perhaps you can be able to get by without using one. Because I'll tell you, customers rarely, if ever, demand a presentation from you. So why is it that you need one? Well, the truth is you don't, unless you want to win more deals. And I say this because in most cases, it is possible to capture a certain portion of your market without any presentation. But if you want to capture more of your market and get higher value deals, then a presentation, a sales deck is going to go a long way towards getting you there. And I want to break that down a little bit further, because to really understand your market landscape, you have to understand that your business and every business has three types of customers. Your first customer type is what I call the I already get it group. These are the buyers who require little to no explanation. They've already done their research. They are advanced in their decision-making process. By the time they come to you, they know exactly what they want, and they basically just need an order fulfilled. Your job there is to essentially not screw up. Your second customer type is the I've been burned group. They had an experience with one of your competitors. They had a really bad experience with one of your competitors. And so they left your competitor, but they know they still need that product or service in some way. So they come to you knowing they need the thing, still advancing their decision-making, but they come to you with a bad taste in their mouth. They essentially displace the feelings they had for them onto you unjustifiably. And you pretty much in that mode are just playing defense. Just like with the I already get it, you're playing defense. Only in this case, you're reassuring them we're not going to screw you over, and we can do what you want. Both of these groups are ready to buy right away. But there's this middle group, and that's what I call the guide me group. And for most B2B companies, this represents your largest customer base, largest in number or largest in market size, as well as the most deal value you can get out of this group. See, the guide me group is collecting information and thinking about doing something, but they're confused. They are in that stage where they have questions. They need someone to guide them along the way, to hold their hand. Today's content is largely focused on winning this guide me group so that you can get higher value deals from your largest potential customer base. But I will say this, a presentation can actually have a lot of impact on the other two groups as well, because they may come to you at an advanced state, but a good presentation can help reframe how they're thinking about their situation. Because otherwise, what's going to happen is the I already get it and the I've been burned group. Do you know what happens most of the time? They price lock us. Because they're so advanced in their decision making and they're ready to do a deal tomorrow, they say, we only want to pay this much. And we're like, oh, sure, no problem. We can get you that discount. And you have there's very little flexibility there. Because you want to get the deal in, and you don't have to do any work, and they're ready to play ball. So sure, we can give you that discount. The guide me group doesn't do that to you out of the gate. They will if you do a poor job selling to them. But if you do a good job of selling to them, then they, budget magically opens up, or more budget magically opens up. And again, with a presentation, these other two groups, the I already get it and the I've been burned, you can have an impact on them as well, where again, you essentially get them to reframe how they're thinking about their own situation to where they're like, okay, I'm listening. And then you start to win back a little of that wiggle room around the price lock situation. So that's why I say, a presentation is so powerful, because otherwise I genuinely believe product alone will not sell unless you desire to be commoditized. Story is what sells, right? 1 in 3 will price lock you if you do nothing. And even if you do something, you got a little wiggle room back. But with that Guide Me group, I tell you, you're giving away money if they commoditize you. They should not be purchasing you the way that they would purchase a can of peas on the shelf at the grocery store, where you say, what's at eye level? This is 79 cents. This is 69 cents. I'm going to buy the 69-cent option, right? You want them thinking strategically. Purchasing you should feel like a strategic decision for them. And because it's a strategic decision, they don't just want lowest price, right? They want to make sure they're making an investment in you because you're going to have a significant impact on their company. And so you don't want to get commoditized down. And if you don't use a presentation, you are at far greater risk of commoditization. It's also important to note that you're not just fighting commoditization, you're fighting the other providers in the market. So you need to have a way to differentiate. And you're also fighting status quo, right? A lot of the companies that I work with, their biggest competitor is the buyer choosing to do nothing. It's not that they go work with someone else. It's that, maybe they have a newer product in the market or a newer category. The buyer just sits on their hands and they opt for status quo. And so this is where to stand out and stand apart. Story is what will sell. And a presentation, this next slide, I've shown it in in all 4 of these workshops so far. A presentation is the linchpin in your company's story stack. So I always show this. It's like your mixtape. And the biggest like hit track on your mixtape is your pitch deck. Because you want to make sure that you get this right. So now let's talk about what does a good presentation accomplish, okay? Well, a good presentation, here's what it does. It explains your value in the context of a story that effectively communicates your unique point of view. And because you communicate your unique point of view, it puts your buyer in the right state of mind. When your buyer is in the right state of mind, what's that going to do? It's going to cut your product demo time in half. It's going to make it easier for them to explain internally to their other stakeholders. It's going to convert your buyer into a champion of your brand. Remember in the demo call workshop, I talked about how you want to create evangelists and champions of your brand. The presentation is like perhaps the largest part towards getting there. And because they become a champion of your brand, it significantly reduces feature battles and pricing wars with competitors, leading to more and higher value deals. And on top of all that, if done well, it becomes the narrative that your entire company gets behind. So sellers, you are on the same page as marketing, and that's a dream scenario that we all want to be in. This can be the narrative that puts everyone on the same page. And so knowing that this is the impact it can have, your product demo should almost always be preceded by a pitch deck because it will put your buyer in the right state of mind. And again, if you remember that framework I shared last month, you can go back, again, search it on YouTube, it's there. You can go back and look at it. Like the middle part of that framework was this pitch deck. So how do you get them in the right state of mind? I want to just quickly go through these next few slides because they've come up in all the previous workshops, but it's important, right? I always talk about mindset every single time because without the mindset, the execution of everything else, it doesn't happen. You need to think like an entertainer, okay? Stop thinking business and instead think like an entertainer, right? We've talked about this over the past few months. The entertainer has one goal in mind. Make the audience feel something, elicit an emotional response, get that buy-in of some type, right? And when you think like an entertainer, you will think in these terms. Most companies are not thinking like an entertainer. How can you tell? Well, when they pull up their pitch deck, it is those slides I showed you at the beginning. It is the NASCAR slide, the proven solution slide, the tech stack slide, the suit slide, the headquarters slide, right? So you want to think like an entertainer and orient yourself entirely around your audience, not around your product. And think like an entertainer and act like you're selling out Madison Square Garden. Because if you were put on stage to play in front of a sellout crowd, would you show 20 slides about your back-end technology? Probably not. You'd say, what can I do here to deliver an unforgettable experience? You would be solely focused on making it a great interaction and great environment and great experience for them. So think like an entertainer means see and speak from your audience's point of view. So how do we actually do that, right? And how do we build a deck that's going to stand out and stand apart? Well, I mentioned earlier, this is where we go ham, right? It's an unlikely source, but I'm telling you, the answers are within this musical. If you're not familiar with Hamilton, perhaps you've been living under a rock for the last 5-6 years. So quick synopsis, hip hop musical. It's gained international recognition. It's won 1 million Tony and Grammy Awards. It is a play about the life and legacy of one of America's founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton. And if you dissect the way they tell the story in this musical, you have the perfect framework for a sales deck. And if you haven't seen it, you've had your opportunity, because it's been on Disney Plus now for the last 14, 15 months. So it's not just that you couldn't get a ticket to the theater, you've had a chance to watch it on your TV at home. So if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry, but I'm going to spoil the ending for you and tell you that Hamilton dies at the end. Big surprise, a guy who was alive 250 years ago is now dead. But here's the thing. Hamilton dies in a pistol duel with the then vice president, Aaron Burr. And that's a pretty shocking thing at face value, right? You're like, oh, vice president kills the Treasury secretary. Could you imagine if that happened today? Like you just read online casually, oh, Kamala Harris shoots and kills someone in her own cabinet, right? Like probably she'd be in prison. But it's funny because a conclusion that would seem crazy by today's standards, if you're in the audience watching, or you're watching on your TV, you actually expect it to happen and you're waiting for it to happen. And rather than leave the theater cursing out Aaron Burr and crying bloody murder, instead, you leave the play thinking and talking about the life and legacy of Hamilton. And that is what people know this play for. It's a play about his legacy, not a play about murder. So how did they do it? It's all in the construct. It's all in the way the story is told. Because what they do that is so effective in getting the audience to that conclusion about legacy is right away, they give away the ending. So the curtains open, the music hits, and the first words that are sung is Aaron Burr walking out onto the stage, and he sings, "How does a bastard, orphan, son of a whore and a Scotsman, dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean by Providence, impoverished in squalor, grow up to be a hero and a scholar?" So what they say, again, those first lyrics right away, they say, hey, how is it possible for someone to have every single odd in life stacked against them and yet still go on to become a great American hero? And they say, you know what, for the next 3.5 hours, we're going to prove to you that it is possible. And that's why you're here today. And at the very end of that first song, Aaron Burr shouts out, "I'm the damn fool that shot him." So the first thing they do is they give away the ending. But people don't leave the theater being like, oh, that's how it ends. I got it. I'm good. I'm out. Now they're hooked, because now they're like, oh, I got to see how this comes together. I'm dying to know how it all happened. No pun intended. And as the play progresses, there's a buildup. And they aid that buildup by having 3 pistol duels. So Burr shoots Hamilton in a pistol duel, but that's actually the 3rd duel in the play. There are 2 other duels that happen before then that allow us to get to that point of believing it and being okay with it. The first duel is where they define the world. It's a song called the 10 Duel Commandments. And what they do in this song is they explain what was known as honor culture and honor code in 1700s America. They talk to you about how dueling existed as a common practice and why it existed, the ground rules that existed for it, etc. What they do is they effectively define the world as it existed for us. And they get us to buy in as a result to the concept of dueling in the first place. So we basically leave that being like, okay, I can get on board with this. I'm in 1700s America. That's how it worked. And I'm not going to compare it to 2020 or 2021 America. So the first duel defines the world. The next duel, or actually, sorry, what I should do is say this first. I'm serious when I say it was intentional that they do this. Here's what the creator had to say. The audience needed to understand what dueling was like back then. This wasn't drive-bys. This wasn't heated people taking their guns outside of bars. This wasn't beef the same way beef is today. It was super codified. There was a ritual about it. It was like legal arbitration, but with guns, right? So they knew, hey, if we're going to get people to that endpoint, we've got to have this first. Otherwise, people are going to be so confused and they're going to be like, that's so unrealistic. Even if it happened in history, they embellish this way too much. Then we get to the second duel. So tensions continue to build with Hamilton. And I will say the other thing too. In the first duel, two largely inconsequential characters are involved in that duel. And no one gets shot. Then they have the second duel. So in that first duel, like there's a duel, but it ends up fizzling out and no one gets shot. The second duel is where something really happens. This is to signify loss and impact. So with the world defined, now this duel, the second one, it involves a character that you're emotionally invested in who dies from getting shot. And what this does is it shows the significance of a duel, and that even though there was a ritual and a culture about it, there's still loss that can happen that's real, and it still has a big impact. And so there's tears in the crowd at this point where the audience realizes what's happened. But duel number two, we are emotionally buying into the impact of a duel. So we understand that it's a thing and it works, and we can get on board with that. Then we emotionally buy into saying, this causes a huge impact. And what that does is it perfectly tees us up for the third and final duel, because the tensions between Burr and Hamilton keep increasing until they finally boil over. But by now we understand how dueling operates, and we've already felt the emotional impact. And they told us the ending at the beginning. So now this third duel, we're anticipating it. It feels like a natural conclusion. It feels like an inevitable ending. Burr and Hamilton face off, Hamilton gets shot, and then we're left, like people leave the theater talking about, like, I didn't realize he accomplished so much. And he was such a, like, I know he was never president, but wow, he did so much for this country. We leave reflecting on his life and legacy. We leave saying, wow, what a hero, which is exactly what they wanted. Because remember, the first words of the play were, how does this guy become a hero? Right? They get us to the exact endpoint they wanted us to get to. And this commitment to story is what gets the audience there. Every single element in the show at every moment was serving the story. The story was not a list of events on a historical timeline. It was the emotional journey that Hamilton and the other key characters needed to make. And that's what you need to do. You need to create an emotional journey in your own pitch deck. So how do we apply this model to a presentation? Well, now I want to show you, this is the presentation. Whenever we build pitch decks, or specifically sales pitch decks at Startup Hypeman, we align it under this model that I call the Hamilton presentation method. Okay, so a quick upfront about this. Your presentation, under the Hamilton presentation method, your deck divides into a total of 4 sections. An intro, followed by 3 duels. No, you're not whipping out guns in your meeting. Within each section, your job is to address specific questions so that you can craft a compelling narrative. In total, across the intro and the 3 duels, there are 10 fundamental questions to answer. And I'm going to break this down piece by piece, question by question, but I want to clarify up front. In this method, again, there are 10 questions you're supposed to answer in your presentation. I am not saying that means you have to create a 10-slide presentation. You just have to answer the 10 questions in however many slides would make sense for the story you're telling. I wholeheartedly disagree with that, that belief that like, oh, your deck should be 5 slides or less, or it should be 10 slides or less. Yeah, if it's bad, no one's going to want to stick around. Most of the presentations that my team and I work on are actually 15 to 25 slides. But it can be like that if it's compelling from start to finish, if there's a story being told. Because to be honest, what if one slide just has one word in big block text on it? Why should that count against your slide count? So don't worry about slide count. Worry about telling the right story in a compelling way, and answer these 10 questions that we'll go through in however many slides it takes. So we start with the introduction. Remember, in Hamilton, they gave away the ending at the beginning. So you're going to do that same thing. You're going to tell your prospect what is the end destination that you're trying to get them to, right? Like, what is the big result that you, if they became your customer, that you'd be able to get for them? And think beyond like number. Like, this is not about ROI. This is about the bigger story. And it's not about product. What's the bigger story here around if they were to change and work with you and use your product or your service, what better life could they now be living? That's what you want to deliver up front. And you might think this could work against you because there's people are like, oh, what about like the big reveal later on? I like to think of it as going to Disney World. So like, think when you were a kid and your parents are like, hey kids, get in the car, we're going to Disney World. And you and your siblings were like, yeah. But imagine if they said, hey kids, get in the car. We're going to drive for 21 straight hours and we're not telling you where we're going. Right? You'd be like, no. And you'd kick and scream the whole way. You want to avoid your customer, your buyer, from internally kicking and screaming throughout your presentation by giving them Disney World first. Right? Like Google Maps it. You can't get directions on Google Maps until you type in a destination. Type in your destination for them, and then you'll go back and start from step 1. Right? So give them Disney World. Give away the ending first. What is that big picture destination that you can get them to? From there, you're going to go back to step 1 in your Google Maps. Right? You're going to be like, okay, so that's where we want to go. Let's talk about why it's important. Your first duel. What you're doing here is effectively talking about the world. So the 3 primary questions to answer in this duel: what does their world look like today? Just what are the terms of it, right? Don't talk about the bad things happening. Just outline what's the landscape today. Then your next question is, what market forces are changing the world, therefore causing what problems? So you give the landscape, you give the world as it exists today relative to them, and now you introduce a little bit of tension, right? You talk about big shifts taking place in the industry, in the overall environment, whatever it might be, and how that's causing problems for the industry, for the players in the industry, which then leads you to answering the question of why is making a change actually necessary? Not why is working with you necessary, but just why is making a change of any kind necessary? So this entire duel, what you're doing here is you're aiming to gain alignment on some basic truth first before bringing up change. And this is key because it creates a micro agreement up front. And a good demo call overall and a good presentation, you're securing these little micro agreements along the way where they're internally saying to themselves, yes, I agree with that. Yes, I agree with that throughout. So by the time you get to the end, it's like 20 yeses that have all stacked on top of each other. So that first layer of buy-in is secured here. If you can just get them to agree with, yeah, that's the way things are today. Because then when you gain that, now they can be more likely to visualize toward the destination as you've advanced your presentation. It also helps put them in a position to feel like it's their presentation and not yours. Right? If you can just get them to agree that, hey, this is how things are going today. What we find in the presentations we build is that the single best way to create this agreement and define the world is to figure out some analogous scenario and draw a parallel to how that relates to their business landscape. After the first duel, you transition to the second duel. The 3 questions you're answering here are all around impact. What crossroads does change represent? So you come out of that last duel and your last question you're answering is, why is change necessary? Then you answer, well, what crossroads does change actually lead you to? So it's like Neo in the Matrix, red pill or blue pill, right? What are the crossroads in front of them? After you present the crossroads, what is the trade-off or loss in doing nothing? Like if they didn't do anything and they held their current position, what are the things they're gonna have to put up with? And then from there, what's the impact of actually making a change? What's the impact of actually doing something? So that first question, the crossroads, right? So it's like I said, it's Neo in the Matrix. And, in the Matrix, it was the red pill or the blue pill, and the red pill represented diving into the Matrix. The blue pill represented go back. You wake up in your bed and none of this ever happened. So the red pill is what you're trying to make the case for. But you still say, hey, let's say you chose the blue pill. Here's what you can expect to continue happening. And because you don't want that to continue happening, that's why the red pill makes so much sense. And here's the impact of the red pill. And I really encourage you to be bold with that crossroads question and take a stance. So this is, whenever I will institute this with sales teams, the biggest part of the implementation, or the biggest resistance in the implementation, is the sales team being like, I'm not going to ask them if they want to do this or do that. And I'm like, why not? And they're like, it's weird. I'm like, well, do it. And then they do it and they're like, oh my God, it actually works. So you get over the initial awkwardness, but it's amazing how many people you talk to will say, well, yeah, this makes so much sense. Of course we want that. I can't see why anyone would want the other way. And that's literally me reciting from listening in on recordings. That's literally what some buyers have said. And again, and now you get them to voice, yeah, we want to do it this way. So it's another micro agreement along the way. So be bold, actually ask the question. Don't skip over that slide. Ask the question, wait till they give you an answer. It's also going to help your audience self-select themselves in or out, which then creates more qualified buyers. So if by chance, you come across someone who's like, I don't know, you know what, that blue pill seems like it could actually be okay. That's fine. They can say that. Now you pause everything and you have to explore that. You take a detour, because if they are not willing to see beyond that, anything else you say is not going to matter anyways. So you've got your chance to address it right then and there. And if they're not budging, you could probably just end your meeting if you wanted to. I'm telling you though, 99% of the people will go in your direction. I want to point out that at this point, through the intro and the first 2 duels, we're not yet talking about your product or service or your company. We're simply talking about the idea of change, the idea of doing things better. And if you do this correctly, and you execute this well, your 3rd duel, this is your inevitable ending, right? Now the introduction of your product or service, now it feels inevitable and it feels good because it's inevitable, right? So this is, what's your plan of attack to get there? Meaning what is your what is your actual offering? What destination does that bring them to? So this is where you're going to bring up the destination again and some of the benefits and the results, and then go through what's your credibility. So this would be your case studies, your G2 scores, your NPS scores, right? Things like that, your customer testimonials. But you put these at the end, not at the beginning, right? And now by this point, you're reinforcing a thought that was already delivered on the very first cover slide. And so that's why it feels inevitable. And that's how it becomes overall a presentation that is about them and their reason to do something differently, and not about you and all of your bells and whistles. This model is how you don't throw away your shot, to quote from Hamilton. If you follow this advice, people will want to do business with you, not only because your product or service is good, but because on top of that, they recognize you as an expert in the field. This model is designed to teach them right? You're building a presentation here that teaches them about their own situation in a way they hadn't considered. And if you can teach someone about their own situation, if you can get them to reframe their own situation, they are going to want to listen to everything you have to say, because they'll say to themselves, huh, you know, I never thought of it like that before, but that's so true. Right? When they say that to themselves, they're like, this Sarah is she's a smart person. I should keep listening to what she's saying. This Sarah, not just Sarah, but Sarah and her entire company, Predictable Revenue, they're smart people. I gotta listen into what they're saying. Right? That's what your presentation should be accomplishing. Right? They basically are saying, man, they know it so well. No one sees the industry the way they do. We have to get on board their rocket ship because they're going to take us places. And when you do that well, guess what? Remember, you insert this, if it's your demo call, you insert this before your actual demo. Now you don't have to show every last thing about your product, because they already get it conceptually and they have bought into it emotionally. So now the actual product screen share is more a formality, and you can be way lighter on it than you would otherwise. Which is why, coming back to last month's workshop, I said it's so pivotal that you, in that demo call flow, that you have a deck before you actually go into your product demo. And if you sell a service and not a product, your demo is not necessarily a product demo. Essentially, think of your demo as this presentation, and then maybe just showing them how you work, from like a functional perspective. This is how you're going to get more conversion, increased conversion rates on your demos. Your deal size is also going to increase. This is the outline that I wish that I knew when I was staring that huge deal in the face so many years ago. But I'm telling you, once I stumbled upon this, I was like, there's really something here. And we've been able to execute it at many companies with a lot of success, where we figure out the presentation that falls under this Hamilton presentation method, and it just works. And what it does, it's not that it works once, it's that it's able to be delivered over and over again across the team, even as your team expands. So it create a scalable narrative, which is so helpful to have. A question I'll often get is like, or what I'll hear people say is, oh no, it needs to be different for every single customer because every customer is different. Honestly, it really doesn't. What you would change out is like, I don't know, if you sell into multiple different sectors, let's say, and one sector is like auto and the other one is fashion, you could just show, like in the case studies section at the end, just use auto case studies instead of fashion case studies. That's where you can get a little bit more customized with it, but like, you don't have to put their logo on the cover slide in order to make them feel like, oh, I did this for you, even though everything else is the same. Right? You can deliver this over and over and over again across your different market segments, so long as your different market segments are all coming from a same base pain point. As long as that's the case, this can apply across verticals. If you genuinely sell the different verticals and each vertical has an entirely different use case and is coming from an entirely different pain point, that's when you might have vertical specific presentations. And even if you do, you'd still follow this model for each of your verticals, right? And so what kind of success does this bring? If you were here last month, you saw all that success that I showed you with some of those companies, Engagely and SearchSpring was kind of the feature company in that case. And we showed you how their close rates went up to like 140%, or their quota, they were hitting 140%, 195% of their quota. And a big part of that, a big reason for that was the presentation ended up, it speaks to their market in a way that none of their competitors are speaking to their market. And it just makes them say, we'd be fools not to do this. And their head of marketing was like, about the deck specifically, this tells the story we've been trying to figure out for years. She wanted to submit it for awards. Or the CEO here at Avana, at an Australian company, Avana, we built a presentation under this methodology. He took it and he pitched it to the largest health insurer in their country. And he was meeting with the CEO of that company and their executive team. And that meeting ended with the CEO saying, "This is great. You really understand our business and where we're trying to go." And they ended up leaving that meeting with a letter of intent. Right. So that's, I'm telling you, like, this is not just like smoke and mirrors when I show you, hey, think like an entertainer, use the Hamilton presentation method. It really, really, really does work. In closing, I want to just give you some parting shots. So to recap, sales decks help you capture your largest customer base, and they are the linchpin in your story stack, which enables a scalable narrative. Challenge is that most decks are so dry and self-centered and miss the point. So what you want to do from a mindset perspective is think like an entertainer to build curiosity and sustain interest. And then tee up your product demo with a compelling presentation. And then use that Hamilton presentation method to make your brand stand out and turn buyers into brand champions. This is a big part of making your overall demo a brand. It's not a product demo, but a brand experience that your customer, your buyer is invited to become a part of. I told you at the beginning, we got some bonuses for you. So let's get those bonuses in your hands. We are going to share this recording out with you. I think it should be available on YouTube immediately after. Yep. And then just some recommended resources. So our designer, our graphic designer at startup, Hypeman, or design artist as we call her, she separately runs a, Instagram and Pinterest account called The Good Deck. And I highly recommend you follow that account, because what she does is just like, I don't know where she's getting it from, but she's literally posting example slides from different companies' presentation, and she'll break it down from like a visual perspective and say, here, why is this information on this side? What kind of emotion does it evoke, et cetera. I would also recommend you listen to my podcast, Startup Hypeman, the podcast. It's generally a show where we talk to company leaders about their growth strategies. And then what I want to send to everybody coming out of this, I'll send you through email, is the Sales Deck Story Builder. So what this is it's a easy, like, walk along form you can fill out to create the framework for your presentation under the Hamilton presentation method. So I'll get that out to you through email coming out of this. And then I also want to just let you know, if you're interested in talking more about this, if you want my help, Veronica's going to throw my calendar link directly in the chat. I'm also happy to show you in private, show you a sample deck using this methodology. So you can kind of see, like, hey, here's how this would actually work in practice. So Veronica will hit you with my calendar link in the chat if you want to talk about working together, if you want to see a sample deck, and if you want an assessment of your current deck, happy to do that. Here is my contact information. That's my direct email. Follow us on Instagram. Don't follow on Twitter because it's a rarely used account that is only ever used to like repost other things. And definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. Just a heads up, I have a creator account on LinkedIn. So to actually connect with me, you got to hit like the more button next to my name, and then there will be a drop down to say connect. Otherwise, I think the default option is follow me, which you could also do that, but I would love you connect with me. And that's the end of my presentation, everybody. That's the end of the Sales and Scale Try Not to Suck Summer Series, and the end of sales presentations that don't suck. I don't know how if we're able to coordinate the chat, but if there's any questions that need to get answered, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, or Sarah, if you have any comments or questions you want to add in as well, that's fine.
Yeah, it looks like no questions so far, but thank you so much. Even my dog Tomato was so enthralled by the presentation that she has jumped up to join us here. So yeah, I honestly, very compelling. Love the parallels to something that we've all seen recently. There are obviously a lot of sales methodology and this type of thing refer back to some pretty old ideas and old foundations. So to have it, relatable to something that we've all seen or hopefully seen in the past couple of years is so interesting. And I can't wait to share this with all the closers that I am connected with.
Right on. Right on. Good. Good. Yeah. It's, yeah, I'll tell you, like, whenever we work with a company, initially they're like, wait, I'm confused. Like, how come the first half of this presentation, we're not like talking about our product? And I'm like, that's the point. If you talk about your product through the first 50%, they will tune out.
Yeah.
But because you don't, they actually are, they're asking you about your product at that point. So it's a total reframing of the information. And I think the other thing I think I should say along those lines is every company is able to spot another company doing it wrong, but then they are very bad at looking at themselves, or they think for some reason they're the exception to the rule. And they're like, yeah, I get you're supposed to tell a story, but we just want like, but ROI is really important for our customer base. So we're just going to talk about ROI for 5 minutes or for 50 minutes, right? Don't think you're the exception to the rule. In reality, you're probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much. What a great series. To all of you guys here with us on this last one, if you haven't checked out 1 through 3, please make sure you do. As Rajiv said, you just type in startup Hypeman, predictable revenue. It's all going to be right there. This one is going to be available pretty much as soon as we end the stream. It's just going to be right there for playback. And feel free to ask away, even kind of after. If you're watching this asynchronously, ask questions in there. We always look, the predictable revenue team is always looking at our YouTube to see if there's any new questions, and we're happy to answer those. And of course, you can connect with Rajiv or myself to ask those questions directly over LinkedIn.
Sarah, thank you to you and the predictable revenue team for being my partner on this journey the last 4 months. I hope we can do some more cool stuff together. I hope this is, I don't think this will be the end.
No.
So I'm looking forward to doing more with y'all. Me
too. Thank you so much.
For those of you who watch this asynchronously in the future, hello from the past. I hope the future is better than today.
True. Well, thank you guys. We'll catch you next time.